the tech is definitely affecting a lot of things. It's almost like the metaverse is actually hitting the universe. And taking a look at the sports landscape, Pat McCaffrey and ESPN, things are getting quite interesting over there because ESPN now is going to a more personality-driven business. They're not necessarily entity-driven anymore. As with social media and just the online personalities, guys like Pat McCaffrey, Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharp, they could actually take their shows on the road outside of that network. They don't necessarily have to be there anymore. And it's causing quite a few rifts within that transition. As Pat McAfee, I keep calling him Pat McCaffrey, but Pat McAfee, he's doing some really dope shit though. I can't lie. The fact that he built his business on his own and he's showing in real time right now how much ESPN really needs him by calling out one of their top executives live on the air. This is how much their business has changed. And their executive, I believe his name is Norby Williams. He's actually trying to sabotage and release false information on the ratings of his show, which does not even include the digital performance of his show. And this has been a culture throughout ESPN in the many years of them trying to sabotage certain shows to not be successful.
More people are watching this show than ever before. We're very thankful for the ESPN folks being very hospitable. Now, there are some people actively trying to sabotage us from within ESPN.
Funny.
More specifically, I believe Norby Williamson is the guy who is attempting to sabotage our program. I'm not 100% sure. That is just seemingly the only human that has information, and then somehow that information gets leaked and it's wrong, and then it sets a narrative of what our show is, and then are we just going to combat that from a rat every single time? I don't know. But like somebody tried to get ahead of our actual ratings release with wrong numbers 12 hours beforehand. That's a sabotage attempt. And it's been happening basically this entire season from some people who didn't necessarily love the old edition of the Pat McAfee show to the ESPN family.
Sure.
There's a lot of those. We've heard them anonymously quoted in the Washington Post, in the New York Post, in the New York Times, in the LA Times, in Wall Street Journal. And they're never like.
And if you notice him naming all this, and it's so interesting watching this with white guys, all those publications tend to be coastal, tend to be left-leaning. When they see a white guy with a country accent from the middle of the country with a tank top on, it always seems to be a pushback with that. Very interesting culturally to see this type of clash. This is really rare to see. And it's really never projected in the media, the uncomfortability that I would say coastal Caucasians have with middle America Caucasians. It's very, very quite interesting. And I believe this has played out before when Vince McMahon and his wrestling company tried to merge with NBC. And that same clash kind of came about. It's a very similar clash that's going on with Pat McAfee down in Connecticut and Bristol. Very interesting.
Like, yeah, love the show.
This is awesome.
It's always like little things to try to tear us down. So even with the enemy within our own camp, somebody that I don't like that guy. That guy left me in his office for 45 minutes, no-showed me in 2018. So this guy has had zero respect for me. And in return, same thing back to him for a long time. So even with that taking place and potential PR, like we're still growing somehow.
Yep.
So we're very thankful.
Yeah.
I think we're doing it right. We're trying to do it as right as possible. We have good intentions every single time we come in here. We don't always get it right, but motherfuckers been getting it wrong for a long time in this specific field. Long time.
Man, he has a lot of power down at ESPN. Live on air, he gets to curse. He gets to wear tank tops. Shout out to Pat McAfee. ESPN definitely need a shakeup like that. They really need him more than he needs them. And again, there's an uncomfortability with Pat McAfee being there at ESPN. And you even see it play out with guys who no longer work for the network. As Bill Simmons even got into the mix throwing light jabs. Once again, there's an uncomfortability with coastal Caucasians, with the Caucasian from middle America. And this is one of the few instances we see this play out in real time.
So this is a quick one, but have you noticed how with sports ratings, everybody's sports ratings are up on TV? Like we just had the Super Bowl came out. It was the most watched Super Bowl ever. 123 million. It's like, man, that seems weird, because I thought people under 25 were on TikTok and on YouTube and on Snapchat and on all the streaming services. You have so many more TV choices. Why would the ratings go up? And then you see like ESPN, they do at the end of the year or the end of the month, be like highest ratings ever for Get Up and all these different shows. Same for Fox. All their shows are up. Everybody's ratings are basically up except for the NBA and whoever replaced the 12 p.m. Sports Center. Well, McAfee's created a new version of how to do this.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Why uh-oh?
I don't know.
Well, we're not allowed to talk about Pat McAfee?
Let's do it. I don't know.
He starts the show and it'd be like, Cowboys, bro, I don't know, man. I don't know. What's going on?
There goes that passive aggressive coastal Caucasian. This is Bill Simmons. This is Boston Bill Simmons. This is Northern Cali Bill Simmons.
What's going on there, bro? And then it cuts to his three people.
Right.
And then they'll be like, well, I don't know. And then they'll go back to him. It's like, it's not good, bro. Not good. Not keep an eye on that, bro.
Yeah. Two of them are looking to take their first cigarette break. And then McAfee's just going.
We don't have a rundown, bro. No rundown on the show, bro.
Dukes of Hazzard live.
I don't know, bro. I don't know. It's, Mike McCarthy. It's not looking good for him, bro. It's not looking good. Not looking good for that guy, bro.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I would be really hard to do this podcast with 7 people staring.
Right.
But then you have to, how do you include the 7 people?
It is tough. Yeah. It is tough.
And be like, oh, I didn't get to Bobby yet.
Right. I felt a little better about bouncing stuff off of Harry after watching some of that show this week.
Jordan Love, I don't know, bro. That guy's good. He's just good, bro. He's just good.
Uh-huh.
He's good, bro.
Yep.
He's good. The guy can sling it. He's good.
So Bill Simmons comments him about having all those microphones. But unfortunate for Bill, he's actually going through a cultural shift over there at The Ringer. You see, the business model he had with employing all those podcasters and having so many different shows, it costs a lot of money to run his network like that. And the way Spotify had read up with Joe Rogan, the guy who has the most successful and most profitable podcast, they're probably more than likely not going to re-up with Bill Simmons because his overhead must be crazy. I mean, he has people at The Ringer thinking about forming a union, and some of his most talented writers or just content creators have already left the company. So Spotify is actually removing themselves from getting into the business of investing into podcasting, as they're not really seeing a rate of return. And also they don't mind partnering up with people like Joe Rogan to actually share a piece of the revenue that he actually makes. So more than likely The Ringer is probably looking at its last few years, and it wouldn't shock me if Bill Simmons actually does not continue that platform outside of that Spotify deal due to all that overhead. But Pat McAfee actually responded back to a lot of his passive aggressive comments. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, check in.
I think Bill Simmons, who has it all figured out.
Yep,
I think he had like 8,000 people right alongside of him.
Like 8,300, I think.
That's a huge number. Yeah, it did not hit. That's really big. Really good, Bill. You still have it. I think we had 250,000 people or something like that. Yeah, keep running your mouth, Bill. Keep running your mouth. Anyways, Chief.
He's right, though. Bill Simmons, for a guy who has such a large kind of platform on Spotify, his YouTube channel actually sucks. It's actually not as good. His digital footprint outside of that Spotify network, just running that website, it just really seems costly. Hire all those writers. He does a podcast that's not really even in the studio. It's just him talking. You just see his face in the camera. It just seems really low budget for a guy who got $200 million out of, or allegedly out of the Spotify deal. But we all know there's a lot of overhead that comes with the way Bill actually set up The Ringer, and it worked in the early 2010s. But in this current media landscape, again, it's going through multiple shifts. And the way Bill Simmons did the podcast back then does not work today. He's got to lower his overhead, and he's got to have way less shows. And I just don't think without all the shows that he has, that Ringer network, without all those shows, the one show with him only, it's not going to be lucrative enough to strike a deal. But Pat actually spoke about what's going on with him and ESPN and some of the proxy wars and games that they're trying to play with him at the network. even though they need him badly. But just some of the old timers there, they're just refusing to kind of let the leverage that they used to have go and adapt to the new media landscape being personality driven.
You said there is a give and take and a tug between what people have hung their hats on for years and made a lot of money and what is coming and what it's going to be.
I don't know. I don't know if there was any conversations that happened behind. Obviously, so like I thought that was a warning shot to that guy. I didn't even think that was
a direct hit.
Yeah, because I'm the executive producer of my show. I report directly to Jimmy and Bob.
Ooh, he got the direct line to those guys, boy. Ooh, keep that in mind. I don't even think Stephen A. Smith has that type of access, or he had to build up years of credibility to gain that type of access to watch Pat walk in the building and instantly get that.
So I'm not really viewing anybody as, like I saw everybody like Pat calls out his boss. I don't got a motherfucking boss. What are we, what are we, Jim Pitaro? Are we talking Jimmy Pitaro or Bob Iger? Like, is that who we're talking about? Because those are people that could technically be described as my boss. And like Burke Magnus as well, and I have a great relationship with him. But I think even Burke would say like, yeah, like we have a good like we are talking like this as opposed to like this. And
they really need Pat. He's definitely a partner. And Stephen A. Smith, you could see at first he was a little bit upset about it, but now he has to adapt to the new landscape with his show online on YouTube and various platforms, because ESPN is now getting into the business of partnering up with personalities. So they really can't offer Stephen A. Smith a large sum of money off of the show he just does on ESPN. Now that formula is completely outdated. You actually have to bring in the audience to ESPN for them to partner up with you.
So that was just a warning shot to, I thought, a person that was, at the same, which is hilarious because he's the former president of the place. I guess a lot of people had a lot of fear of him. I did not. I do not have, that guy left me sitting in his office for 45 minutes, no-showed me when I was supposed to have a meeting with him, right? When 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever.
No-showed you.
No-showed, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
And you remember that.
What's that?
And you remember that.
This thing's a fucking elephant brain,
There
buddy.
you go.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I got everybody's.
Yeah.
And he also banned all my friends from coming on my show. So there was a ban of ESPN talent on my show on YouTube that came directly from him, which so much so that I started a hashtag ESPN stinks the day that everybody got banned from my show. It only trended for like 8-9 hours or something like that. And then that's the next day is when I met Jimmy Pitaro. Jimmy Pitaro called me and said like, hey, how do we, what's the deal? And I told him about, you guys are banning my friends from coming on my show. Matt Hasselbeck, who worked at ESPN, Jeff Passan worked at ESPN, Dan Orlovsky worked at ESPN. All these people that I've known since
For a while, right.
before they got into ESPN. Like they're not even allowed to come on my podcast or whatever, or my YouTube show. You guys banned it. So like that guy was not a fan of me or our operation for a long time. So then whenever ESPN signs us and he runs SportsCenter and our show is now in place of SportsCenter at noon, I'm a fan of SportsCenter. We all watch SportsCenter. I grew up on da-na-na, da-na-na.
All did.
But there became like a
Now he's kicking his ass out like da-na-na, da-na-na.
a war almost from behind the scenes from like SportsCenter people and like people that have been at ESPN a long time against us coming in and taking their jobs and all this other shit. And I didn't see it like that. We were like pumped that we made it to the big leagues. Like, hey, I'm pumped that we're on the worldwide league. Like that's how I viewed it.
Come on, man.
And this is what I'm talking about playing a checkers player. Like get the ESPN deal done. I'm like, this is awesome. Like we joined the ESPN team. So lucky to be here. We get access. And then immediately it's like, this guy sucks. This guy's ruining ESPN. And it's not coming from people outside ESPN. It was coming from people within ESPN. And I did not expect that at all. So I immediately like, okay, I'm in war. Like if that's what we're doing, we're in war. And then once you start learning about how shit's going behind the scenes, things that are being said to people, things that are being leaked, the timing in which they're being leaked, it's like, oh, they're trying to kill me. Like they're trying to make our show impossible to advertise with. They're trying to make sure people don't watch our show. So like, as I started learning that, I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to, I don't know how this has gone in the past with other people.
It ain't going here.
But yeah, this particular white trash kid from Pittsburgh, like, hey, Suits, this is not how this is going to go. So that was just a warning shot. That wasn't even like supposed to be, and then obviously it goes big. And I heard from, this is no lie, no less than like 40 people that have worked at ESPN or used to work at ESPN. And they were like, thank you for saying what you said. And I was like, well, if I really crafted a statement about that, I mean, I could have said something much better, but I also did not appreciate the thing I didn't think about, once again, Checkers player, I did not expect the backlash afterwards. Like Burke Magnus just became the president of content at ESPN. I think he has a great vision for what the future of sports media should look like. He was a big part of us joining ESPN. People were attacking Burke because it made him look sloppy because it's inside the building.
Right.
People were attacking Jimmy because it looked sloppy. And that was something that I did not think about. I was very apologetic about. Like, I didn't mean to take down my allies or make allies look bad in the whole thing, but I genuinely did not expect it to get as big as it did because I didn't think I said anything that was like that crazy.
No, you kept it real.
Or like, I'm a pretty good talker, you know, I'm a pretty good promo cutter. Like, if I really wanted to saw a motherfucker down, like, I thought I could have done it in a much bigger way.
He definitely could, but he's just adapting to the corporate environment. And I would say ESPN has to adapt themselves to Pat's type of environment if they want to remain as a player in this space. Because getting into the personality space, you have to be less robotic. And ESPN is going to have to loosen up some of those fucking box suit ties that they have their anchors wearing when talking about sports for God knows what reason. To wear a suit and tie to talk about sports on TV is kind of crazy when you think about it. And it's kind of antiquated and outdated. So one of the ESPN colleagues that thank Pat for stepping up to Norby Williamson is Dan Le Batard. He spoke on some of his experiences with Norby. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, check in.
So, to have had access at that time to the most powerful man in sports, who was an ally of mine who wanted me to start little fires, but he's not out, to the Disney power machine after George Floyd, to have, like, to be in there and be like, wait a minute, can I get to Iger and Disney on, like, real change stuff? To now watch cowboy hats make a Mets with Aaron Rodgers that gets to Iger and Disney and gets to the top of the power chain because he's got the power to not need ESPN anymore because these brands have, like, ESPN needs this now. They have to, so they make all sorts of precedents for him. He can curse on television and everything else. And again, I need to make this clear, like, more power to him because Pat McAfee, you have done an amazing job of realizing before anybody else did that this was a space that the people who were actually dominating this space weren't as good at competition as you are. Because a punter got into the space and figured it all out. I can knock these journalists out of the way. So may he have all of the fun and chaos and anarchy that is shaking that machine from the inside. Because to me, it's comedy to watch it, but the portions of it that hurt are like, man, I was so close with whatever our show was, which was sort of like that, to getting into the real, corridors of power where I could have maybe influenced made a change in how bullshit corporate the statements were after George Floyd. How like, because you've seen the machine, whatever was happening, that moment after the pandemic.
Right here, he's about to explain how ESPN shifted from woke to not woke and how fake it looks overall. Just this whole corporate shield of just being politically correct, how fake it even makes you look.
That year after George Floyd, to see the machine that was saying to us, well, at every turn, no, we're the Black Lives Matter now, to see it now shift and everything go back to the way that it was, it has been a little jarring, given that at that moment, I remember it, we were in it, it lasted for a while, it felt empowering, it felt strong, it felt like, oh, okay, maybe people will be heard. To see the machine go right back to where it was, How do I say any of that and walk you guys down that path without sounding like I'm bitter at ESPN or bitter at McAfee? Like, I want to walk that path honestly, but that's how it happened from my viewpoint. So to see him call out by name an executive, I had to go, and when I said what I said, I had to go meet with Pitaro in New York, and there were headlines, and then stuff gets leaked about what my salary is, and all the stuff that he's complaining about started happening to us at the end. I enjoyed seeing him call it out. I was surprised to see that there were no consequences for the person that he called out or for him, but it's a new age over there. They have to make the compromises because I think they need him more than he needs them.
I said that the other day.
And that is Facto Mundo. Definitely the media entities like ESPN, which were almost Teflon back in the broadcasting cable space, where a lot of consumers were forced to tack on maybe an extra $10 to $15 on their cable bill, are now faced with choices where they don't have to necessarily sign up for that program. So they're losing out on their subscription service. And now, due to the technology, their employees are now empowered to venture out on their own and build their own entities and actually become a competitor, or even having the optionality of partnering up. So a lot of major cultural shifts, not only financially, so a lot of major cultural shifts been going on over there down in Bristol, Connecticut.